Hello, welcome back to Crime 11. This is the kind of thing where I wish there wasn't so much fodder for content, but such is the world we live in, so here we are. To begin, I'm just going to start off with a simple question, and that is, who likes to shop? Because I certainly do. And when I say shop, I don't mean online shopping, which I partake in as much as anyone, but actually traveling to a brick and mortar establishment and having to interact with live people. Oh no, right? That is certainly more of a daunting task compared to simply clicking a button, but it does still have its uses. To that end, who's ever gotten up early on a free morning, let's say a nice clear Saturday, and decided to start hitting up stores right as the doors open? Like I have. I like shopping, but I prefer it in relative serenity. So if I have a morning to spare, I definitely like getting out there before the crowds start picking up. And on the Saturday of February 2nd, 2008, there were 4 separate women who all had the same idea. That morning at 10 a.m., a Lane Bryant clothing store opened for business. The store was located in a shopping center in Tinley Park, Illinois. Tinley Park is a smaller village in Cook County that lies about 30 minutes south of Chicago, and it's known as being a quiet, middle-class, low-crime suburb. The Lane Bryant was located in a shopping center called Brookside Marketplace, which, along with the Lane Bryant, featured multiple other popular establishments and was usually bustling with activity on any given day. And this particular Saturday started out no differently from any other, but any sense of normalcy would come to an end mid-morning with the following 911 call.
911 emergency. Lane Bryant.
I'm looking at bullshit.
What you just heard was portions of a 911 call that was placed at 10:44 a.m. from the Lane Bryant. That wasn't the full call in real time. It was a compilation of snippets created to highlight the mostly unintelligible utterances of a male suspect in the background. But if you were listening closely, around 5 seconds in, you heard a female whisper, Lane Bryant. That woman was named Rhoda McFarland, and she was the manager of that Lane Bryant. In other versions of the 911 audio, you can hear that she also said Tinley Park. And so, although it's obvious that she's in distress and trying not to be overheard making that call, she managed to quickly relay the most pertinent of details to the call taker in order for them to nail down an exact location and send help. And that was really heroic of her, honestly, because that would end up getting her killed. Incidentally, there was a police officer already at Brookside Marketplace handling a matter at a different business, and that unit reached the Lane Bryant within 2 minutes of the 911 call. Unfortunately, what they arrived to was a very ghastly scene. Rhoda McFarland and 4 other women were dead, and there was a 6th woman who was alive but seriously wounded. However, she survived her injuries, and as the only surviving victim, she was also the only first-hand witness that could help the police piece together the sequence of events that resulted in the murders of the 5 other women. As it happens, the survivor, who has never been identified publicly, was also an employee of Lane Bryant. She was a 33-year-old nursing student who worked weekends at the store. Rhoda McFarland actually had not been scheduled to work that morning, but she was known to pop up unexpectedly on her days off to pitch in wherever she was needed. And the store was having a clearance sale that weekend that she figured might draw in a lot of traffic, so she showed up to help out. Rhoda was an Air Force veteran who had been working at Lane Bryant for about a year after leaving her former line of work as a church pastor. Lane Bryant was initially only supposed to be something to tide her over until she found other employment, but she ended up enjoying it so much that she stuck around. So it was her and the unnamed associate opening the store for business at 10 a.m. that Saturday morning. Within the first minutes of the doors opening, 2 female customers came in to browse, making a total of 4 women in the store. Around 10:08, a man walked in. He was holding some type of paperwork in his hand and made it seem like he was a delivery person. He greeted the employees and the customers and made brief small talk, but moments later, he pulled out a gun and announced a holdup. He herded all 4 women into a back room where they were made to lie face down on the floor, and he bound them with duct tape that he came prepared with, apparently. At some point while this was going on, 2 other women customers entered the store, and he captured them as well, and they were given the same treatment. It was reported that he made sexual advances towards one woman and fondled her, but other than that, what exactly took place in the store during the course of this extended robbery has never been made clear, at least in anything publicly reported. 40 minutes is a very long time to remain situated in a place of business holding 6 people hostage, especially if the motive was simply robbery. That's typically an in and out type of operation. What is known for sure is that despite Rhoda's attempt to surreptitiously summon police, the suspect must have caught wind of it because her line disconnected suddenly. Perhaps she hung up because the suspect noticed it, or maybe he took the phone and hung it up. Who knows? But it was within moments of the call hanging up that he proceeded to shoot everyone. Rhoda McFarland was killed with a bullet to her forehead. The 4 customers were each killed with a bullet to the backs of their heads. And those 4 women were the following. Connie Woolfolk. She was 37, worked as a mortgage lender, and was a mother to 2 sons. One was 16 at the time and one was 10. The 10-year-old suffered from spina bifida and required a lot of care, so that Saturday was a rare day that Connie had to herself. She was going out with girlfriends at night and popped up at the Lane Bryant to pick up a new outfit for the occasion. Jennifer Bishop was 34. She was a nurse with 3 children, ages 7, 5, and 6 months. She actually lived in South Bend, Indiana, but she and her husband were in the Chicago area for a work conference that he had going on. Carrie Chiuso was 33. She was a high school counselor and had been shopping at Lane Bryant to get an outfit to wear to an outing with some old college friends. Sarah Safransky was 22. She had graduated from college the previous May with a degree in finance and obtained a job in the financial sector. And she had gone to Lane Bryant to stock up on some winter work clothes. The unidentified Lane Bryant associate was shot as well. However, she says she turned her head right as the suspect fired, so she only received a grazed wound to her neck, and then she played dead. This associate provided a very detailed description of the suspect, leading to a composite sketch which has been updated in recent years to this 3D image. He was described as a black male with a medium to dark complexion. He was between 6 feet and 6'2", with broad shoulders and a husky build in the area of 230 to 290 pounds. His age was estimated to be between 25 and 39. He was wearing a dark-colored waist-length jacket and black jeans with embroidery on the pockets similar to a cursive letter G. His most notable feature was his hairstyle, which was 3 to 5 puffy cornrows braided straight back along his head, with 1 smaller braid down the right cheek with 4 green beads on the end. He was clean-shaven and had neat-looking manicured fingernails. His weapon was a .40 caliber Glock handgun, the casings of which were recovered from the scene, and he made off with several $100s from the store. A Target store that sits opposite from where the Lane Bryant was had a camera that captured the front of Lane Bryant in its frame, and there was an SUV and a sedan seen on that footage in front of the Lane Bryant somewhere around the time the killings took place. They were described as pulling up at the same time and leaving at the same time, so it's been loosely speculated that they might have been connected to this incident. However, that just seems to be based solely on the fact that those vehicles were seen in proximity to the Lane Bryant, and there's no information that the suspect was seen entering one of them, or if the suspect even exited the store from the front at all. Maybe he went out the back. But whether he fled in either of those vehicles or he was a lone wolf and had his own, Interstate 80, a major highway, is only a stone's throw away for anyone who might be looking to get low really quickly after murdering 5 people. So whatever his means of exit and escape were, or what the path of travel was, they definitely worked for him, because this past February 2nd, 2023, marked the 15-year anniversary of this gruesome incident, and it still remains unsolved. Lane Bryant vacated that site after this, and the space remained empty for over 5.5 years until TJ Maxx took it over and opened up for business in November of 2013. Not everyone was enthused about that. Some people felt like the site should be made into a permanent memorial for the murdered women, and some people felt like the building should be demolished altogether. To assuage some of those negative sentiments, TJ Maxx donated $10,000 to the Tinley Park chapter of a nonprofit called Together We Cope, which provides emergency assistance to families in crisis. And the corporation that owns Brookside Marketplace contributed a matching donation. Over the last 15 years, the Tinley Park Police Department has remained stringently dedicated to solving this massacre, to the point where they even assigned 2 new detectives to the case as of last year, in February 2022. And the FBI, the Illinois State Police, the Secret Service, and an entity called the South Suburban Major Crimes Task Force, which is a conglomeration of about 60 different law enforcement agencies that focus on serious crimes occurring in the southern suburban area of Chicago, have also all pitched in various ways over the years. Authorities have received upwards of 7,500 leads and have spent about $1.5 million following up on them. There is currently a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest, of which $50,000 was donated by Lane Bryant. The Tinley Park PD's website has a page dedicated solely to this matter, featuring the 911 call audio that I played earlier. They isolated portions of the voice particularly because they're hoping that someone might recognize it one of these days. So although his various outbursts are muffled or you can't really understand what he's saying, but maybe for a word here and there, the police weren't interested in having it enhanced enough to capture the exact words because that would distort the sound of his voice. Or even if they did do that behind closed doors, they only wanted the public to hear the untouched sound. This case has always stuck with me because I remember reading about it in national headlines when it first happened. And that's an era I recall distinctly because in early February 2008, I was well into my future department's hiring process and was about 3 weeks out from getting hired, as it turned out. But before starting my police career, I was a corporate America 9-to-5 drone. And the previous fall, since I really didn't have a life or much to do in the evenings, and I was pretty fresh out of college and poor, I got a part-time job at a clothing store at the local mall. It was 5 minutes from where I lived. I only worked like 10 hours a week, and we got a sweet discount on clothes. But that lasted about 4 months, and then I started the police academy and had to quit. So this incident struck a chord with me because I could relate on a couple of levels, as far as briefly being a retail employee myself, and also as having done my fair share of shopping in my lifetime. And in engaging in either of those activities, it had certainly never crossed my mind that I might walk into a place of business on a fresh Saturday morning in the middle of a tranquil suburb and end up ruthlessly murdered. But no one would really anticipate that, would they? And this is where we have to ask a critical question, which is, who decides to rob a women's clothing store at the top of the morning? That's an extraordinarily bizarre choice of a target. And this person entered the store within 10 minutes of it opening. So that suggests that he was already set up somewhere waiting for it to open. But in terms of risk versus reward, how much money would any person of average intelligence really think they're going to garner from this operation? Well, apparently that answer is around $400. In commemoration of the recent 15-year anniversary of this event, there were 2 cousins interviewed by CBS Chicago because they both worked at the store at the time that this happened. One of them was supposed to work on that Saturday, but her young son was in the hospital, so she called out. And her cousin wasn't able to cover for her, so neither of them were there that morning. And that could have actually been the main reason that Rhoda McFarland ended up making an appearance. But it was astonishing to the cousins that someone would rob it because it wasn't a cash-intensive establishment. The majority of their customers paid by credit, debit, or check. But the business opened each day with the 2 registers stocked with $200 each, and that very well could have been sufficient enough to attract someone to partake in this type of activity. Sometimes it really doesn't take much, unfortunately. So when pondering why someone would rob a Lane Bryant just as it opened, we could answer with the inverse of that question. Why not rob the Lane Bryant right when it opened? For one, customer traffic would be minimal earlier in the day versus later, which might account for the timing. It's a store that caters to female clientele, so maybe the suspect was looking to prey specifically on people who he figured would be less likely to present a threat or to take any adverse action against him. And the store didn't have any surveillance cameras, so that could have been a factor if we assume that he cased it at some point prior to robbing it. But even if he didn't, that was still a win for him. The brief delivery man gambit and being so conversational with everyone in a store was likely just to buy him a few moments to assess the scene and get a quick read on everyone there before he got down to business. So while it was a bizarre selection for robbery purposes, maybe that's exactly why it was chosen, because it caught everyone off guard, to the very extent that 15 years later, we still all remain baffled. But a few things I am personally baffled by are, A, why this man was in the store for so long. Again, a simple robbery should not take that long, especially at a public place that's open for business. The fact that he had to capture the 2 additional women who came in after this had kicked off is exactly why a smart perpetrator would try to limit their time at a scene like that. The only thing I can come up with is that maybe he was disappointed with his take from the store itself, so he formed a half-baked plan to capture and rob customers as they came in. But then that was foiled by the 911 call, and that's when he went crazy. B, it's peculiar to me that a person who stone cold executed 5 women with gunshots to the head managed to botch murdering the 6th woman, because she turned her head to the extent where only a graze wound to the neck was affected. Ostensibly, that's a stroke of good fortune, but at the same time, it does give me pause. Not only in the lone survivor circumstance, but also because that person happened to be a store employee. Am I implying the possibility of an inside job? Yes. It's perfectly logical to consider that the surviving associate may have been in cahoots with the suspect and that her life was purposely preserved because of that. Let me just clarify, that would be if, and that is a big if, she was involved. And there is nothing to suggest that she was. But when you're talking about the brutal murders of 5 women that have gone unsolved for 15 years now, I do think it's owed to them to weigh every possibility, even if that forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the dark side of human nature. One of which is that people are not always who or what they seem to be. Admittedly, I might harbor a heightened sense of cynicism that was ingrained in me by police work, but the fact remains that people can be pretty duplicitous. Be that as it may, I certainly want to make sure that it's clear that there's never been any suggestion by authorities that the associate was involved or suspected to be. They would not have been doing their jobs thoroughly if they did not consider that angle, but I've never seen anything indicating that they think that's the case. Have people besides the authorities had thoughts like that? Yes. This is a random comment on a social media post about the most recent anniversary of this, where someone speculated that false information was provided to the police in order to cover up for the real murderer. And that's not the first time I've seen lines of thinking similar to that in reference to this. I'm going to tone my own cynicism down and assume that her coincidental survival is likely just that. A very lucky coincidence. Things like that do happen, and I can only imagine how frightening, traumatizing, and life-changing that experience must have been. Not only for her, but for the loved ones of the 5 women whose lives ended suddenly that day after what should have amounted to nothing more but a low-key shopping venture. Yet here we are, 15 plus years later, still looking for the person in this image. It is amazing that someone whose image was rendered to such a T remains unidentified. And maybe the person who made that Facebook comment I just displayed was really trying to express more of a general innate uneasiness that someone who committed such a callous act and whose likeness has been so vividly depicted and circulating for 15 years is still nowhere to be found. which just seems so spectacularly unjust in the grand scheme of the universe that it's easier to assume that there must have been some type of foul play afoot with the description, because who in the world wouldn't turn this guy in? However, it must be considered that the suspect might not have looked exactly like that in real life, which is the natural limitation in creating a forensic composite sketch from someone's memory after the fact. And there's a reason. It's a function of recognition memory versus recall memory when you retrieve memories from your mental filing cabinet. Recognition memory means you're presented with something that you've seen before, and so that serves as a cue that enables you to identify it based on your previous experience and knowledge. And that's easier than summoning up memories based on recall memory, which means retrieving them from scratch, basically, without any cues. Simply stated, in terms of crime and suspect identification, a person trying to describe an unknown perpetrator to law enforcement is going to have a harder way to go compared to being shown a photo array containing the suspect and identifying him from that. That's because the photo of the suspect is the cue that prompts the recognition. And blah, 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 right? The point is, assuming the victim/witness did give a good faith description, the composite could still just be off. But that hairstyle is distinctive and definitely would be memorable. So there's no doubt in my mind that there's someone out there who knows who did this. And the village of Tinley Park and the Tinley Park Police Department think so as well. They try to keep the case in the limelight as much as they can, especially every year around the anniversary date. It's a horrible event to have to commemorate, but keeping attention on it will hopefully one day lead to the big break that it desperately needs. Until then, it will continue to cast a sad shadow over the town. And that was the story of the Lane Bryant murders in Tinley Park, Illinois. Thank you for watching. Until next time, whether shopping or otherwise, please be safe.